Now, the one thing I do want to document, because we may have some people in here that are really not even a NASCAR fan whatsoever, and that's simply what is a college. Well, again, my love for big old college, especially, it's pretty simple. The crew chief is the head coach, and then in some regards, you may look at the fact that the crew chief is the head coach, and the driver is somewhat like the head coach. The difference in a head coach in NASCAR versus a head coach, unfortunately, you can never call timeout. Yeah, we have cautions, but that's probably when a crew chief decision making even gets more ramped up. So that's, to me, the biggest difference of a crew chief in NASCAR and maybe a crew chief in NASCAR. In the evolution of a crew chief that I even saw during my 18 years, and especially over the last 13 years, because if I go back to that very first race team that I went to work for in 1880, we only had 3 footballs. You had to be pretty much a specialist at everything that you did. Now, we had big old coaches that came in and helped us at night and on the weekends, but there were only 3 of us, and we ran the entire schedule. Spin it ahead to 2000, my last year as a crew chief, I very rarely got to work on the race.
Man, am I hungry. I knew I should have eaten something earlier. How long is this race? 400 miles. Man, there's no way I can make it that long. You know what would be good right now? A delicious, just fresh Subway sandwich.
For the most part, I had to become more of a head coach. And you know, our sport is like any other sport or any other business. At the end of the day, your success was about people. And as I mentioned a while ago, you know, I think one of the reasons that I did have some success was surrounding myself with good people. I know my son Brandon that races knows there's 3 things you do not mess with. Larry MacReynolds, and Larry MacReynolds. He looked at me periodically and said, "Dad, now wait a minute, Dad. You barely had a high school education." And I stop him dead in his tracks, and I would tell him,
I am Larry Mack. I don't really care who you are. You would rather get in a cage with a wildcat than mess with Larry Mack.
What a knucklehead. And of course, he was killed. But as I've told you, this is just between you and me. You look at Ryan Newman, very successful Sprint Cup Series driver. He just won the race in Indianapolis a couple of months ago and weighs over 3,000 pounds. He actually has a comp load. You know, when I look back at my 18 years as a crew chief, you look at the drivers, it's almost like a who's list of drivers. When I was able to work with David Earnhardt and Dale Irvin and Dale Ellison, and when I look back at the drivers that I worked with, I can't say that I'd had a good relationship with any of them, or actually that I'd had a bad relationship with all of them. But when I look back, the drivers or driver that I had the most success with ended up being, I think, the driver that I had a bad relationship with, and that was certainly Allison Earnhardt. When you look at a Sprint Cup Series head coach, one thing that I've told a lot of people, and I'm sure my wife Linda would probably 100% agree, that it's absolutely a life that you have to experience, because we have the longest stick and ball of any sport out there. To me, the biggest difference of a crew chief in NASCAR and maybe a head coach is Valentine's Day to Thanksgiving.
I may come on myself.